"They are there, no doubt," Jack said confidently, "crouching down, I expect. He would not be there if they weren't, you may be sure. Yes, there they are, those two muffled up figures. There, one of them has thrown back her cloak and is waving her arm." The two young men waved their caps. "Are the anchors holding, Watkins? There's a tremendous strain on that hawser." "I think so, sir. They are both tight. Put them round the windlass and give a turn or two. We must relieve the strain on that hawser." Since they had first seen the wreck the waves had made great progress in the work of destruction, and the steamer had broken in two just aft of the engines. "Get over the spare spars, Watkins, and fasten them to float in front of her bows like a triangle. Matthews, catch hold of that boat hook and try to fend off any piece of timber that comes along. You get hold of the sweeps, lads, and do the same. They would stave her in like a nutshell if they struck her. Thank God, here comes the first of them." Those on board the steamer had not been idle. As soon as the yawl was seen approaching, slings were prepared, and no sooner was the hawser securely fixed than the slings were attached to it and a woman placed in them. The hawser was tight and the descent sharp, and without a check the figure ran down to the deck of the Seabird. She was lifted out of the slings by Tom and Jack Harvey, who found she was an old woman and had entirely lost consciousness. "Two of you carry her below. Tell Johnson to pour a little brandy down her throat. Give her some hot soup as soon as she comes to." Another woman was lowered and helped below. The next to descend was Mrs. Grantham. "Thank God you were rescued," Tom said, as he helped her out of the sling. "Thank God, indeed, Mrs. Grantham, and thank you all. Oh, Tom, we've had a terrible time of it, and had lost all hope till we saw your sail, and even then the captain said that he was afraid nothing could be done. Minnie was the first to make out it was you, and then we began to hope. She's been so brave, dear girl. Ah, here she comes." But Minnie's firmness came to an end, and now that she felt the need for it was over, she was unable to stand when she was lifted from the slings, and Tom carried her below. "Are there any more women, Mrs. Grantham?" "No, there's only one other lady passenger and the stewardess." "Then you had better take possession of your own cabin. I ordered Johnson to spread a couple more mattresses and some bedding on the floor, so you'll all four be able to turn in. There's plenty of hot coffee and soup. I should advise soup with 2 or 3 spoonfuls of brandy in it. Now, excuse me, I must go upon deck." 12 men descended by the hawser, one of them with both legs broken by the fall of the mizzen. The last to come was the captain. "Is that all?" Tom asked. "That is all," the captain said. 6 men were swept overboard when she first struck, and 2 were killed by the fall of the funnel. Fortunately, we had only 3 gentlemen passengers and 3 ladies on board. The weather looked so wild when we started that no one else cared about making the passage. God bless you, sir, for what you have done. Another half hour and it would have been all over with us. But it seems like a miracle your getting safe through the rocks to us." "It was fortunate indeed that we came along," Tom said. 3 of the passengers are dear friends of mine, and as it was by my persuasion that they came across in the steamer instead of in the yacht, I should never have forgiven myself if they had been lost. Take all your men below, Captain. You'll find plenty of hot soup there. Now, Watkins, let us be off. That steamer won't hold together many minutes longer, so there's no time to lose. We'll go back as we came. Give me a hatchet. Now, lads, 2 of you stand at the chain cables. Knock out the shackles the moment I cut the hawser. Watkins, you take the helm and let her head pay off till the jib fills. Jack, you lend a hand to the other 2 and get up the trysail again as soon as we're free." In a moment all were at their stations. The helm was put on the yacht, and she paid off on the opposite tack to that on which she had before been sailing. As soon as the jib filled, Tom gave 2 vigorous blows with his hatchet on the hawser, and as he lifted his hand for a third, it parted. Then came the sharp rattle of the chains as they ran round the hawser holes. The trysail was hoisted and sheeted home, and the Seabird was under way again. Tom, as before, conned the ship from the bow. Several times she was in close proximity to the rocks, but each time she avoided them. A shout of gladness rose from all on deck as she passed the last patch of white water. Then she tacked and bore away to Jersey. Tom had no time to go down below and look after his passengers. They consisted of the captain and 2 sailors, the sole survivors of those who had been on deck when the vessel struck, 3 male passengers, and 6 engineers and stokers. "I have not had time to shake you by the hand before, Tom," Grantham said as Tom Virtue entered, "and I thought you would not want me on deck at present. God bless you, old fellow. We all owe you our lives." "How did it happen, Captain?" Tom asked, as the captain also came up to him. "It was the currents, I suppose," the captain said. "It was so thick we could not see a quarter of a mile any way. The weather was so wild I would not put into Guernsey, and passed the island without seeing it. I steered my usual course, but the gale must have altered the currents, for I thought I was 3 miles away from the reef when we saw it on our beam not 100 yards away. It was too late to avoid it then, and in another minute we ran upon it, and the waves were sweeping over us. Everyone behaved well. I got all, except those who had been swept overboard or crushed by the funnel, up into the bow of the ship, and there we waited. There was nothing to be done. No boat would live for a moment in the sea on that reef, and all I could advise was that when she went to pieces everyone should try to get hold of a floating fragment, but I doubt whether a man would have been alive a quarter of an hour after she went to pieces. Perhaps, Captain, you will come on deck with me and give me the benefit of your advice. My skipper and I know the islands pretty well, but no doubt you know them a good deal better, and I don't want another mishap." But the Seabird avoided all further dangers, and as it became dark the lights of St. Heliers were in sight, and an hour later the yacht brought up in the port and landed her involuntary passengers. A fortnight afterwards the Seabird returned to England, and 2 months later Mrs. Grantham had the satisfaction of being present at the ceremony which was the successful consummation of her little scheme in inviting Minnie Graham to be her companion on board the Seabird. "Well, my dear," her husband said, when she indulged in a little natural triumph, "I do not say that it has not turned out well, and I am heartily glad for both Tom and Minnie's sake it has so, but you must allow that it very nearly had a very disastrous ending, and I think if I were you I should leave matters to take their natural course in future. I have accepted Tom's invitation for the same party to take a cruise in the Seabird next summer, but I have bargained that next time a storm is brewing up we shall stop quietly in port." "That's all very well, James," Mrs. Grantham said saucily, "but you must remember that Tom Virtue will only be first mate of the Seabird in future. That I shall be able to tell you better, my dear, after our next cruise. All husbands are not as docile and easily led as I am." End of Section 13. The Paternosters, by G. A. Henty. Recording by Mike Harris.